deep dive. Today we're taking a journey back in time, really gigging into the lives of John and Mary Campbell Hamblen.
Yes, and we've got some fantastic sources, family histories, personal accounts. It's not just dry facts.
Exactly. These records give us a really rich glimpse into their world, late 18th, early 19th century Virginia, and well beyond.
It really feels personal. You get insights that official documents just don't capture. It lets you connect more.
Absolutely. So we're going to trace their path. They started out in Maryland, moved through Virginia, then Tennessee, and eventually ended up in Indiana.
Quite the journey for that time.
It really was. We'll look at their family, the challenges they faced, John's time in the War of 1812, and Mary's resilience through it all.
And the music. We can't forget their son, David R. Hamblen.
Oh, definitely not. He was a fiddler, and we'll explore his musical legacy. Some of his tunes have actually survived, which is incredible.
That musical thread, it's a really interesting way to understand their lives, the culture, how traditions were passed down.
Okay, so let's dive in. Mary Campbell. She was born way back on February 26, 1782, in Cecil County, Maryland. Her parents were James and Mary Campbell.
Standard enough beginning.
Well, here's a little wrinkle. The 1870 census says her birthplace was Jackson, Maryland. Now, Jackson is in Cecil County, but, it wasn't officially a town until 1815. She was born in 1782.
Ah, yes. That kind of thing. It pops up quite a bit in historical records, doesn't it?
So what do you make of that?
Well, it could be a few things. Maybe Jackson was a known local name before it was official. Or maybe whoever gave the census info just used the current town name they knew. It really highlights how you have to, cross-reference and think about how information was recorded back then. Memories shift, place names change.
That's a really good point, something to keep in mind. Anyway, around 1786, when Mary was only about 4, the family moved. They went down to Lee County, Virginia, right at the southwestern tip.
Big move. Why there?
To be near her grandfather, James Campbell Sr. So family was clearly a factor. Then around 1807, Mary marries John Mullins Hamblen. His parents were Job and Eleanor Mullins Hamblen.
Right, so the families are settling in that Virginia area.
Yes, laying the groundwork. But they didn't stay put right away. Just a couple of years after marrying, maybe 1809 or so, John and Mary are listed as living over in Claiborne County, Tennessee.
Okay, so a quick hop across the border.
But they didn't stay long. Pretty soon they moved back to Virginia, specifically to the western part of Mary's father's land.
Interesting. Back and forth. Why do you think they went back?
That's a good question. Maybe opportunities weren't what they expected in Tennessee. Or perhaps family ties pulled them back to Virginia.
That seems likely. That kind of movement, seeking land, opportunities, staying near family. It was pretty typical for that era. People were adaptable, finding the best spot for a growing family.
Makes sense. And they found their spot. They settled on a little creek there, and it actually became known as Hamblen Creek.
Named right after them. That really roots them to the place.
It does. Mary had inherited 100 acres from her father, and that was the core of their farm. John later bought another 5 acres right next door.
Expanding the homestead.
Yep. And on that extra bit of land, they built their home a double-log residence. That's where they lived, until John died many years later.
A double-log house. You can almost picture it. Sturdy, practical, probably built it themselves. Speaks volumes about the self-sufficiency needed then.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. John's service in the War of 1812. We actually have some decent details here.
Oh, good. Always interesting to get specifics on military service.
So he first enlisted as a corporal. This was in Captain John Clark's company, 63rd Regiment, Virginia Militia. That was December 27, 1813.
Militia service.
Right. And that initial stint lasted until April 11, 1814. Relatively short. Any thoughts on that?
That tracks with militia units. They were often called up for shorter terms, specific needs, local defense, that sort of thing. Not like signing up for a regular army for years.
Okay, that makes sense. Then later that same year, August 30th, 1814, he re-enlisted. This time as an orderly sergeant in Captain Josiah Pennick's company.
Stepping up in rank. Orderly sergeant's a position of responsibility.
And it didn't stop there. By November 1814, the muster roll shows he was promoted again to ensign, and he was transferred to Captain Isaac Tinsley's company in the 8th Regiment.
Ensign. So basically a junior officer, corporal to sergeant to ensign. That's quite a progression in a fairly short time.
It is, isn't it? What does that suggest to you?
It suggests he was seen as capable, reliable, maybe showed some leadership potential. In wartime, they needed men who could step up, and clearly his superiors saw something in him.
He was finally discharged on February 23, 1815. But there's this wonderful family story about his initial departure. told by their son David.
Oh, I love these personal anecdotes. They tell you so much.
Right. So apparently, Mary had sewn him a whole new suit of clothes, all homemade, for his service. The day comes, he gets on his horse, a good young one, the story says, and rides off, leaving Mary with their 5 young children at that point.
Wow, 5 kids. That's tough.
Imagine, so he's marching for a couple of days, and he just starts feeling this immense weight of responsibility for his family back home. He's torn.
That really humanizes it, doesn't it? Beyond the battles and politics, it's about fathers worried about their families. That tension between duty to country and duty to family.
Exactly. So while he's still in camp, he manages to find someone else, another man, to take his place. A substitute.
Was that common?
It happened, yes. Especially in the militia. Sometimes arrangements could be made. So he gets his release and heads straight back home.
Back to Mary and the children.
Yes. And here's the incredible part. Just a few days after he gets back, news arrives, Andrew Jackson's big victory in New Orleans, and the war's effectively over. The armistice was signed.
No way. What timing?
Isn't that something? Talk about a twist of fate. Imagine the relief.
Unbelievable. It really speaks to his priorities, though. Family came first in that moment, and...
Okay.
Well, lucky timing didn't hurt.
For sure. So, after the war, life continues on Hamblen's branch of Martins Creek in Rose Hill. That's where they raised their family. 8 children in total.
8? A big family.
Yes. They learned practical skills. The boys learned shoemaking from John. The girls homemaking from Mary. And just so we have them, their names were James Campbell Hamblen.
Okay.
David Russell Hamblen, the musician we'll talk more about.
Right.
Eleanor, who married a Ramsey. George Hamblen, note the slightly different spelling sometimes seen. William Hamblen. Jane, who married a Wheelis.
Yeah.
Williamson Hamblen.
Yeah.
And Sarah C., who married an Absalom Langford.
That's quite the list. James, David, Eleanor, John, George, William, Jane, Williamson, and Sarah. It really grounds their story, naming them all. Puts flesh on the bone.
It does. Now, John, his trade was shoemaking. And his sons, James, David, and William, helped him out.
Family business, isn't it?
Seems like it. And physically, he was apparently quite imposing. Around 6 feet tall, which was tall for the time, weighed about 200 pounds. Broad shoulders, they said 36 inches across.
Wow. A big man.
And get this detail. It was said he could span his own ankle with just his thumb and finger.
Really? That's quite specific. Paints a picture, though, doesn't it? Strong guy, built for physical work, life on the frontier.
Exactly. And besides shoemaking, he was known as a talented fiddle player. Played well, apparently, and even taught some of his sons.
Ah, so the music came from his side, too. Interesting.
Yes. But unfortunately, his life took a hard turn. Sometime between 1825 and 1830, the records aren't exact on the year he had a serious accident.
Oh, dear. What happened?
Horse riding. Apparently, his horse fell over a cliff. John survived, but he suffered a really severe leg injury.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah. He never fully recovered. For the rest of his life, he needed a crutch and a cane to get around.
That must have been incredibly difficult. For his work, for just getting by, especially with a large family to support.
Absolutely. A constant reminder of the risks back then. An accident like that could just change everything. It underscores the hardships they faced.
Definitely. Life could be precarious.
And speaking of hardships, later on, as the country headed towards the Civil War, the family saw a division. We know that sons James, David, and William had already moved north before the war started.
Okay, so they were out of the immediate conflict zone in Virginia, Tennessee.
Right. But his son George stayed. And his sons-in-law, Absalom Langford, Sarah's husband, and David Ramsey, Eleanor's husband, they also remained and fought for the Confederacy.
So the family was split by the war, like so many others?
Tragically so. Both Absalom Langford and David Ramsey died in service during the war.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. It just shows how the Civil War ripped through families, communities, north and south. It wasn't abstract, it was deeply personal.
Very much so. Now, moving towards the end of John's life, his health started failing in the fall of 1866. He was bedridden through that next winter.
A long final illness.
It seems so. Now, apparently, he'd always been religious in his beliefs, but hadn't formally joined a church. During this last illness, though, a minister, Reverend Samuel Shelby, held services at their home.
Bringing the church to him.
Yes. And John decided to formally join the church then. He even expressed this really strong desire. He wanted to be baptized in Hamblen Creek.
And the creek named after them.
Yes, the very one. But sadly, he was too weak. His health just didn't allow it.
Wow. That's poignant, wanting that connection to his home, his land, his family's place right at the end.
It really is. He passed away in late March 1867. Just as the leaves were starting to come out on the trees, he was buried in the old Campbell Cemetery.
A life lived fully despite the hardships. That desire for baptism in the creek. It speaks volumes about his roots.
It does. And shortly after he died, Mary received a letter from their son, Reverend William Hamblen. We have accounts of it.
The son who was a minister?
Yes. It sounds like a very touching letter, expressing sympathy, reflecting on life and loss, offering spiritual comfort. He mentions his own children, who were living up in Illinois then, Mary, John, and Richard, and notes that his Mary and John were married.
Keeping those family connections alive across the distance. Letters were so vital then. It gives you a real sense of their bonds, their faith, especially during grief.
It really does. So Mary, she stayed on the farm for a couple more years, until the fall of 1869.
Without John.
Right. Then she made a big decision. She sold the homestead, the place on Hamblen Creek, sold it for $500.
End of an era for her there.
It was. And in October 1869, she moved. She went with her daughter Sarah Langford, the widow, and her son George to Brown County, Indiana.
Indiana, following some of the children who'd moved north earlier, perhaps.
Exactly. She spent the rest of her life there, living first with her son David the fiddler, and later with Sarah. She passed away at Sarah's home on March 12, 1873. She was 90 years old.
90. A long life, especially for that time. Moving to Indiana. That makes sense. Seeking the support of her children in her later years, especially after being widowed, a common pattern. Family networks were crucial.
She was buried there in Indiana in the Taggart Cemetery. A long journey from Maryland to Virginia, Tennessee, and finally Indiana.
A remarkable life, spanning so much change.
Now let's circle back to David Russell Hamblen, the musician's son, born September 22, 1809.
Right, the fiddler.
He learned farming, he learned shoemaking like his brothers, but music was his real passion.
It called to him more.
Seems so. There's this great story when he was 17. He got his local merchant to order him a violin from Baltimore.
Baltimore, that's quite a distance. He must have really wanted it.
He must have. And he gave the violin a name. He called it Betty.
Naming his instrument, that shows a real connection, a deep affection for it. It wasn't just a tool, it was a companion.
Exactly. And Betty stayed with him his whole life. Apparently, as late as 1934, descendants still had it, and experts thought it had an amazing tone and was quite valuable.
Wow. A quality instrument that lasted.
And David became incredibly skilled. Even professional musicians complimented his playing. He brought a lot of joy to people with his music.
But he couldn't read music, right? That's what the accounts say.
That's right. Couldn't read a note of sheet music.
Yeah.
But his memory was phenomenal. Some sources claim, and it's hard to verify exactly, but claim he knew maybe 700 or 800 tunes by heart.
700 or 800. From memory, that's astounding. It really speaks to the power of the oral tradition back then, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Music learned by ear, passed down person to person. His memory must have been like a steel trap for tunes.
Incredible dedication, just soaking it all in.
He was also known as a great storyteller. Full of jokes, anecdotes. Must have been quite entertaining.
So, likely played at dances, gatherings, that sort of thing, informal settings.
The accounts don't list specific concerts, but yeah, that seems highly likely. Just part of the community's social life. And the music ran deep in the family.
We heard his father played.
Yes, John Mullins played. And David's grandfather, Job Hamblen, was also a fiddler. And his brothers James Campbell and Williamson played too. Plus several cousins, Eliakim, David Washington, and William Preston Taylor. All fiddlers.
Wow, it really was a family tradition then. Not just one talented individual, but a whole network of musicians within the family. Fiddling must have been central to their gatherings, their identity.
It certainly seems that way. And David passed it on. His son Williamson and his grandson Arminus Porter also became musicians, carrying it forward.
Keeping the legacy alive.
But David wasn't just playing other people's tunes, he was composing his own.
Oh, really? A composer too?
Yes. The records list 39 fiddle tunes that he composed himself.
39. That's significant. Do we know any of the titles?
We do. It's a great list. Gives you a real flavor of his world. Things like Three Forks of Cumberland, Big Tennessee, Chadwell Station, Lost Indian, Callahan. There are actually two parts to that one. Roving Sailor, Shelbyville, White Cockatoo, The Cuckoo, The Mockingbird.
You can hear the places, the nature, the stories in those titles, can't you? Three Forks of Cumberland, Big Tennessee, clearly local references. Roving Sailor, Lost Indian, maybe reflecting popular themes or events.
Exactly. There's also Hankins Raid, Spirit of David R., maybe a personal one, Turkey in the Straw, Sally Good and Cotton Eye Joe. Perhaps his version's Mountain Hornpipe, also in 2 parts.
Spirit of David R. That's intriguing. A self-reflection in music, perhaps.
Could be. Then there are tunes related to historical events, like Bonaparte crossing the Rhine, Queen of France, Drummer Boy of Waterloo, Bonaparte's Retreat, Isle of St. Helena.
So tapping into those big historical narratives, too. Interesting mix.
And more traditional-sounding titles like Flowers of Edinburgh, The Campbells Are Coming, maybe a nod to his mother's side. Indian Eat the Woodchuck, Forked Ear, Haste to the Wedding, Girl I Left Behind Me, Jay Bird, Knock at the Door Till the Cook Comes In, Cold Rain, Pride of America, Brew Bonnets Over the Border, and Jolly Blacksmith. Quite a repertoire he created.
That's an amazing list. It shows a real creative output alongside his playing.
And here's something really special for us. One of those titles I mentioned, Chadwell's Station.
Yes.
Well, the intro and outro music you hear for this deep dive, that is Chadwell's Station, written and composed by David R. Hamblen himself.
Get out! Seriously, that's fantastic.
It is a direct musical link from his life, his talent, right here to our conversation today.
What a perfect connection. It really brings his legacy right into the present. You're not just talking about the music, we're actually hearing it. Wonderful. It highlights how art can just transcend time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, wow, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Following John and Mary Hamblen's incredible journey.
From Maryland to Indiana, through war, family growth, hardship, and resilience.
We looked at frontier life, John's military service, the challenges like his accident, the divisions of the Civil War.
And the joy, too. The family bonds, the music, especially David's lasting contributions. Those personal accounts really brought it alive, beyond just names and dates.
They really did. You get a sense of the fabric of their lives, their strength.
And David's music, carrying that cultural heritage forward, it's a powerful legacy.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how our own personal family histories connect to these bigger cultural stories, these historical moments. Are there musicians, storytellers, maybe resilient stories in your own family's past?
Good question. How do those personal threads weave into the larger tapestry?
Exactly. Maybe take a moment to reflect on the resourcefulness John and Mary showed, navigating all those changes. It's quite a reminder, really, that every life, every family leaves behind its own unique story, its own legacy.